Stay engaged in the task, people. We need everyone focused on finding evidence. If you're talking, you're not concentrating. If you're talking, you're distracting others. If you're talking, you can't hear commands. Sorry, Nick mumbled. He kept his eyes on the dirt and tiny plants and pine needles. An hour passed and then another. Every 5 minutes or so, someone would call a halt to flag evidence. They found a cigarette butt, another cigarette butt, a third cigarette butt, a small piece of black rubber that looked like some kind of stopper, a broken piece of flat blue plastic about a half an inch long, the gold line of cellophane used to open a pack of cigarettes, part of a Snickers bar wrapper, a crumpled silver gum wrapper with no gum inside, a little bow no bigger than the end of Nick's pinky that surely had to have come from a bird or small animal. But nothing really cool. No phone, no gun, pool of blood or bullet casing, no old condoms or scraps of fabric. Even Detective Harriman seemed to have lost interest. He no longer came forward to inspect every find. When Dmitri called a halt for another bit of paper, Nick sat back on his heels and looked behind them. The ground was dotted with dozens of flags. The search began again. They were just past the point where the girl's body had been found, when Nick's eyes spied something glinting on the ground right in front of him. He started to reach for it. Wednesday. Things go south. What was Nick doing? Ruby shot her hand past Alexis, who gave a startled gasp, and grabbed his wrist. His forefinger and thumb had been about to close on something a few inches in front of his right knee. Nick jerked his hand back, and Ruby let go. She saw what he was looking at now, a half a dozen strands of blonde hair about 5 inches long. When Nick called for a halt, Mitchell took one look and then called over Detective Harriman. When he saw it, he made a little grunt. Ruby's gut told her this find was far more important than any of other bits and pieces they had flagged today. She only wished she had been the one to spot it. Mitchell and Detective Harriman conferred in low voices. Ruby strained to hear but couldn't make anything out. Then Mitchell clapped his hands. We're going to break for lunch, people. Everyone backed out carefully and then went down the trail to where they had left their backpacks. Mitchell and John began handing out sandwiches while the others gathered in small clumps and talked. Instead of joining them, Ruby ducked under the tape and watched the detective. This morning she had snuck her SAR's backpack and outdoor clothes out to the trunk of her car before her parents were awake. Then she had called in sick to the school's attendance office. Her parents got up but didn't say much more to her than good morning. They weren't really morning people, and she guessed that they were just happy she was no longer arguing with them. After putting her bowl in the dishwasher, she picked up her school backpack and called out a goodbye. Instead of driving to school, though, she had gone to the sheriff's office, parked, and hopped into the SAR van. Ruby had never before defied her parents, but this was her chance to be part of something she had only read about, a real crime scene investigation. Their order had been passed on irrational fears. She might be different from other kids, but being part of a SAR was good for her. She was socializing with her peers, the way that her parents always advocated, and because of the clues they were discovering, SAR might actually help catch a killer. She watched with interest as Detective Harriman took a series of photos. The first one showed the larger scene from outside the crime scene tape. Next, he ducked under the tape and took medium-range shots that included the spot where the girl's body had been. Then he took close-ups of the pieces of hair using a flash to show every detail. For the last set of photos, Detective Harriman laid down a ruler. Finally, he pulled on gloves, carefully gathered the hair, and slid it into a small, clear evidence envelope. That envelope went into a slightly bigger manila envelope, which went into his coat pocket. When he was done, he wove around the other evidence flags and ducked under crime scene tape. Ruby followed him. They both grabbed sandwiches. He walked off as he started to unwrap his sandwich. Then he realized she was still following. He turned around. Yes? Another girl was found murdered in Portland a month ago. Strangled in Washington Park. Did you know that? In case he didn't, Ruby had a printout of the article in her coat pocket. His eyes narrowed. It's not like we have that many homicides. And I heard that wasn't a girl. That was a woman, an adult. Have you identified her yet? No, he didn't offer anything more. But look at the hoodie she was wearing. Ruby pulled the other color printout from her pocket and folded it. No adult would wear that. Girls at my school wear that brand all the time. It's something skaters wear. Skaters and their girlfriends. And when you consider the angel wings and all that pink and sparkles, you've got something that no woman would wear. Uh-huh, the detective said. He was nodding rapidly, which Ruby had learned meant either that he felt it was his turn to speak, or that he was bored, or maybe both. So that makes two. 2 homeless girls strangled in Portland. Maybe there's a serial killer, and a lot of serial killers strangle their victims. Detective Harriman sighed. The truth is that a lot of murder victims are homeless people. They panhandle, so they're constantly interacting with strangers. It's pretty common for them to sleep outside, which means anyone can walk right up to them, and they won't even know until it's too late. They're vulnerable, mobile, and nobody asks too many questions if one of them just disappears. But none of that matters, Ruby, because we've already got an ID on the girl you guys found yesterday, and she's most definitely not homeless. She goes to school right here in Portland. What school? What's her name? That information hasn't been released yet. We're still notifying relatives. His gaze sharpened. And remember, you can't talk about what you learned here. What happens in SAR stays in SAR. Don't worry, I already know that. But I still think you should consider whether it's a serial killer. Look, it's Ruby, isn't it? She nodded. So, Ruby, I'm tired. Late last night, I had to go tell these parents their baby girl was dead. Do you know how hard that was? Now I just want to eat my lunch without having to make conversation. And then I want to go back out there with you guys and find the clues that will help me catch this girl's killer. That's all I want. I don't want to talk about whether it's a serial killer, because it's not. We have a homeless black woman and a rich white high school girl. Serial killers have types. They don't just go around killing anyone. They both were strangled, Ruby reiterated the obvious. So, strangulation is perfect if you don't want to make much noise, if you don't want to attract attention. He held out one of his big hands, all hairy knuckles, and flexed it. The other was still wrapped around half a sandwich. It doesn't even require any special tools, and just because someone gets strangled doesn't mean a serial killer did it. A guy might go to rob someone, or there's a physical altercation and things go south. When he doesn't have access to a weapon, he has to use the only weapons he's got, his hands. But was the other girl also strangled with a ligature? The newspaper didn't say it. Okay, Ruby, that's it. Detective Harriman waved his free hand. Get out of here and let me eat my sandwich in peace. They spent another 3 hours searching, finding 24 more small bits of trash, but nothing Ruby considered of any significance. By the time they finished, her knees were aching. Her chilled hands had lost some fine motor skills. When they got back to the lot where the van was parked, a reporter for the Oregonian was waiting. Detective Harriman didn't allow him to ask questions, but he did let them take a photograph of them walking down the trail, and he gave their names. Mitchell said it would be good publicity for the unit. Ruby realized it also meant she had to figure out something before her parents picked up tomorrow's paper from the driveway.